Two parties in the House of Commons are now calling for Speaker Anthony Rota to resign. The New Democrats and the Bloc Québécois, the third and fourth largest parties in the House, with the NDP in a confidence and supply agreement with the Liberals holding up this minority government. Now, we did request both Liberal and Conservative House leaders to come on the show today, but they were not made available. But NDP House Leader Peter Julian is available, and he joins me now. Mr. Julian, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
I want to start with Speaker Rota's explanation. He says that he was the only one involved in this. It's his responsibility. Do you accept that explanation?
I think so. Certainly in my time in Parliament Hill, the Speaker has a number of powers, including being able to fill certain seats that are allocated to him or her. And so we also know from a daily question period that the Speaker has the sole prerogative of actually introducing people in the galleries in the House of Commons. So it's certainly his explanation certainly coincides with what I've experienced here on Parliament Hill since my time here. That being said, the reason why the NDP is calling for him to step down is not because he hasn't done a good job. He did a terrific job, I think, steering us through COVID and through the convoy and putting in place the virtual parliament. It's because the magnitude of the incredibly erroneous decision that was made last Friday to introduce a Nazi to the House of Commons is something that simply cannot be, I think, in any way met. That magnitude can't be met with anything other than the Speaker stepping down. And it's unfortunate. But when you think of the huge impact that this has had on the Jewish community across the country, we're in Yom Kippur, and we have people, families, who saw the glorification, the honoring of somebody who worked for the SS that was an appallingly violent organization that helped in the genocide, the Holocaust, the killing of millions of Jewish people. It's simply we simply can't allow an apology to be the only response to an error of that magnitude that has hurt so many people.
So you did it right off the bat. The Bloc Québécois, after their House Leader, Mr. Terrien, responded in Parliament, he did not call for Speaker Rota to resign, but later their leader, Yves-François Blanchet, issued a statement saying he should step down. How did the New Democrats come to this position so quickly? Did the caucus meet? Did you just discuss it with your leader? I mean, how did you know right away at 11 o'clock this morning that your party was going to take this position?
Well, we discussed it with the leader, of course, and leadership, and members of our caucus were in communication as well through the course of yesterday. There was some possibility that Mr. Rota might have tendered his resignation this morning. So the reason why I waited for his comments was to make sure that we saw whether it was going to be an apology or him resigning. The fact that it was an apology, I think, then gave us the obligation to speak very clearly and candidly to the Speaker that the magnitude of the hurt that was caused by Friday and the fact that this has tarnished the reputation of the House of Commons worldwide. This is not something that can be simply swept under the carpet with an apology. It is something that needs to be met with responsibility. And the Speaker, having taken the responsibility of the action, needs to, I think, draw the appropriate conclusions and, upon reflection, step down as Speaker. We can't have a situation moving forward where we have to do a double vetting of people that the Speaker introduces in the House of Commons. We can't respond to the hurt that was caused last Friday with a simple apology. It takes more than that. It takes responsibility, and that's why we're asking the Speaker to step down.
Okay, so you've put responsibility on Anthony Rota. You think he should step down. The opposition Conservatives were putting a lot of this responsibility on the PMO and the Prime Minister himself for the way this was allowed to happen. In your view, what responsibility do you think the Prime Minister's office bears for this?
My experience on Parliament Hill has been that the Speaker has wide prerogatives, including to fill their seats, the seats that are allocated to the Speaker. So I don't really understand where the Conservatives are coming from on this. The Speaker has acknowledged full responsibility. I think we need to put the focus really on the hurt that has been caused to so many Canadians by the fact that we were honoring a Nazi in the House of Commons, as somebody who worked with the SS, somebody who was affiliated with an organization that massacred millions of people. These are profound reactions, what we're hearing from Canadians from coast to coast to coast. I think parliamentarians need to work together and send a very clear signal. I think in the case of the Speaker, I'm hoping that clear signal is something that he will hear and understand, and over the course of his reflection, perhaps tonight, and perhaps over the next few days, he will take what I think is the only conclusion you can draw from this, that he does need to step down.
Okay, we reached out to the Speaker's office today to get an explanation of how the seats are allocated, you know, for an invitation to an event like President Zelensky's address to Parliament, and how the coordination and vetting happens. And what they've essentially told us that a bunch of seats are set aside based on party standings. The PMO gets some and the Speaker gets some. And once that allocation of seats has been approved, each group submits lists of potential guests to the protocol office, which then coordinates in the sending of invitations. But they say the lists are not shared between groups. For example, the Speaker's guests are not shared with the political parties or the Prime Minister's office, and vice versa. And it's up to the Office of Corporate Security, which reports to the Sergeant at Arms, to do the vetting. Is that your understanding of how this went? This explanation would suggest you didn't know, as New Democrats, who was being invited. The Prime Minister's office didn't know who was being invited. Does that add up with your understanding of what happened and on past events on Parliament Hill?
I think so, and you can sense as well, I mean, this was a very truncated planning session. It was only a few days from the initial invitation to the actual conclusion with President Zelensky's speech. That being said, I certainly think from our standpoint with the NDP, we're going to be pressing a lot harder the next time there is a foreign leader coming to Canada to get that information from protocol. It shouldn't be a one-way street where we provide information.
Mr. Julian, given the supremacy, the independence of the Speaker's office, the supremacy of Parliament, like these are important principles in the system. Can it be shared without intruding on those things?
I think we need to have more information, for sure. We're given basically an itinerary at the very end, not given a lot of advance notice at all, and certainly in a situation like this, where the impact has been on the entire Parliament, this tarnishing, this stain is on all of the House of Commons, and by extension to Canadians. I can understand why Canadians are upset. This is something that never should have happened. So we'll definitely have conversations, I think, in the coming days, how to ensure the maintenance of parliamentary privilege, of course, right, but ensuring that it is done in a much more rigorous way. This kind of thing can never happen again. The hurt that has been caused by this incident, the introduction of a former Nazi in the House of Commons, is not something that can ever happen again.
I wonder, this has become such an international incident that it is kind of... it has tarnished what was a significant day on Parliament Hill on Friday. How much damage do you think this has done to Canada internationally, and how do you repair it?
I think it's done enormous damage to Canadians who often have family members that were victims of the terrible genocide that was the Holocaust. I can't imagine how their feelings are today. And my family lost 2 family members fighting Nazism. My grandfather and my uncle are on the cenotaph in New Westminster. I know how I react and how I feel about this. The tarnishing of the reputation of the House of Commons, of course, that is something that we're seeing worldwide. Also, President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people who have been fighting a struggle against the Putin regime that has been violent and tragic and horrible. And yet, instead of helping him, giving that kind of support that Canada should be giving, it has, I think, hurt him as well and hurt the Ukrainian people. The fallout from this is extensive, and that's why the Speaker owning up to it, I think, is an important first step. There are a whole range of modifications that we have to do. But the Speaker of the Canadian Parliament ultimately is responsible for the person that he invited here and introduced to us. And that is why I do not see any other alternative to him stepping down as a result of this catastrophe.
Well, just as a quick final point, Mr. Julian, he didn't resign today, and the Liberals did not call for him to resign, and the Conservatives did not call for him to resign. focusing instead to put the blame as best they can on the Prime Minister's office. Do you think Anthony Rota survives the week as Speaker?
I think he is a good man. I think he's done good things as Speaker. I think he can understand as well as anybody how this has tarnished Parliament, and his responsibility as the Chief Officer of Parliament, as the Speaker elected by all members of Parliament. I'm sure he'll be reflecting tonight. I'm confident that ultimately he'll make the right decision.